Let me just begin with an introduction. I am sorry about the food because it's coming in bits and pieces because of the funny cooker that we've got here and cooks that don't understand this kitchen, but they will understand the kitchen up the road on Friday night. So please come back then, because on Tuesday night in that kitchen we had the food very promptly and could start much quicker. So I'm sorry it's not worked tonight very well, but I hope you are enjoying what you are eventually getting to eat, or digesting it well for those of you who had your food about half an hour ago. The subject that I've set tonight is, this is the way, what is the meaning of life? It's a question that I always seem to get asked in China. One time I was invited to be a visiting lecturer in the postgraduate international relations course in Beida. And it was very interesting because they were allowed to fire questions at me for about 2 hours. And some of the questions were ones like, how do you come to terms with your country's imperialistic past? For which, you may be surprised to know, I got a standing ovation. They asked me, which will interest those of you who have your roots in Taiwan, they said, if we invade Taiwan, what do you think the West will do?
Not much.
And then they said, and then they asked me, how come you British can get on with the Americans and we find it difficult? Which I thought was a very funny question. But then another student put up his hand and said, excuse me, what is the meaning of life? International relations. Well, yeah, I suppose it is in a way. And then another time, I was in another university near Dongzhimen in Beijing, and in this university I'd gone to see an African friend, but the reason I'd gone to that university was this African who was doing a PhD there, his professor had made friends with a professor friend of mine in Edinburgh, and my friend in Edinburgh had asked me to take some British football magazines for this Chinese professor who watched British football on television. So I went to see him and I said, tell me about you. And he said, well, I'm an engineer and I publish on engineering, but in my spare time I write books about the meaning of life. I said, tell me about it. He said, well, I've been writing this book about a scientist. He said, it's me, really. And he said, I look for the meaning of life in science. And I did lots of research, but I didn't find it. So I thought, maybe I will find the meaning of life in international literature. So he read all sorts of international literature. Those of you who are English will be amazed. He read all the novels of Charles Dickens, which I thought was amazing because I found them so boring when I had to study them. And he said, I didn't find the meaning of life in that. I thought, I'm not surprised. And then he said, I look for the meaning of life in philosophy. And he said, I went to a philosophical conference after I'd read Nietzsche, and it was in Beijing, and he said, I met these British philosophers and I said to them, what is the meaning of life? And they said to me, that is a meaningless question. So he said, I thought I might find the meaning of life if I got lots of girlfriends and really got drunk a lot. So he said, so I did, but I didn't find the meaning of life. And then he said, I went up into the north of China to visit my parents. He said, while I was there, out of curiosity, I went into a church, and he said, I don't think the people could answer my questions, but I think they had the answer. I think they had found the meaning of life. But quite often people say to me, what am I here for? What's the point of my life? Because people find that meaninglessness is actually very difficult to live with. Now, I've hinted to you, when people ask next one, what is the meaning of life? These actually are students in Yining, in Xinjiang, that I was teaching. And when you ask the question about the meaning of life to students, some people, like those British philosophers, will say that's a meaningless question. There isn't any reason why you are here. You are just by chance. You better make your own meaning, because there isn't any reason why you are here. And some people therefore say, make your own meaning. But one of the things I have discovered that a Christian a very long time ago wrote about, a man called Augustine, said about God, you have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. What he's saying is there is in people a sort of emptiness and lack of direction until they actually get to know God. A student in Zhengzhou in Henan province once said to me, I've made a mess of my life. I need to get back in harmony with the one who made me. I'm lost. I need to find the way. And I want to read to you on one of these, it's page 42, but you may have got a different one in the lottery, and yours will be on page 37. But open to 42 or 37 to where it has in the margin the large figure 14, because it's chapter 14. This is a book that Jesus' best friend wrote to tell you stories about Jesus, and he said he picked them very carefully to help you to believe and to find the life-changing experience that Jesus can bring. And you will see here, it says, Jesus, the way to the Father. Thomas said to Jesus, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Do you see what he's saying? He's saying, actually for people, there is a way to live. There is a way to go. There is a destination that is intended for our lives. Now, I actually want to read the whole first bit of that chapter, because that's what I want to explore with you as we think about meaning of life. Look where it says Jesus comforts his disciples. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place I'm going. And that's when Thomas said, no, we don't. And Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. Now, I find it very interesting as I read this good news that John wrote. Because what I've just read begins, don't let your hearts be troubled, don't worry. But if you look up to the previous paragraph, you can see one of the people he's talking to, and it's a guy called Peter. And he says, I'm brilliant. I've really got my life together. I can really please you in everything. I will never let you down, Jesus. And Jesus says to him, I tell you the truth, before the cock crows, or we might say, before your alarm clock goes off tomorrow, you will disown me 3 times. Now, that's very interesting, because I want to suggest to you that for Peter and for human beings, the context in which we think about the meaning of life is actually a context of shame. Can you take me over to the next little bit? Yes. Because Jesus says to Peter, Peter, you think you're okay. You think you can live life perfectly. But actually, he says to him, you're not as strong as you think you are. You're not as good as you think you are. And one of the things I find when I have discussions with people is, for a long time, they argue about God. And then sometimes God comes near and they're very ashamed. I can remember when I was a small boy, and my brother and I had a wonderful game. We used to like to use my parents' bed as a trampoline. And we would jump up and down on the bed when Mum and Dad were not there. It was wonderful fun. But as we became older, we became more adventurous, and we climbed on other parts of the furniture and jumped across onto the bed. And one day we decided we would do it together. And the bed broke. And my mother said, wait until your father comes home. And I hid behind the sofa in the sitting room. And my father came home and I was so embarrassed. I did not want to look at him. I did not want to feel his hand. I was very ashamed. Some of you may have gone to a tutorial when you haven't prepared properly. You know that awful embarrassment that you feel. But actually, I find people talk about, I want to have harmony with God, and yet, if God were to get close, it would feel rather uncomfortable, no? I was once here with a scholar from China. Many years ago, we had a long intellectual discussion. And at the end of it, I thought, I want this guy to understand that being a Christian is not just about intellectual discussion. It's not just about way of looking at life, because Jesus is alive and it's a friendship. So I said to him, I want to talk to Jesus about you. Shall I do it now or shall I wait till I get home? Because some people prefer me to do it when I get home. He said, no, do it now. So I was sitting next to him and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, Lord Jesus, this is, I can't remember his name, say Joe. This is Joe, and he has all these arguments and I don't know how to persuade him. But please will you get near to him and, as it were, give him the feel that you're very important. And suddenly this scholar, he nudged me and said, Dick, there's something you need to know. I said, what do I need to know? And to my great surprise, he said to me, I am a very dirty sinner. Now, I'm ashamed. I'm not comfortable. I'm not as good as I'm pretending to be. Somebody from the Philippines once said to me, why didn't you tell me it would be so terrible to meet God? It's very embarrassing to be near to God when you understand how good he is and how much we disappoint him. Somebody actually sent me a text one time and said, I keep on praying that God will actually love me. Because when you feel ashamed, you feel he couldn't possibly, don't you? Now, that is the context in which Jesus says this wonderful thing, do not let your hearts be troubled. Isn't that a wonderful encouragement? Shame, but Jesus says, I want to tell you a way that you can be in harmony with God, that you can be at home with God. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust, oops, no good me getting there. Trust in God, or you believe in God. Believe or trust also in me. Now, I want you to see, this is not automatic. He doesn't say it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how ashamed you are, you're okay, we're all okay. What he says instead is not that it's automatic, but he wants to know you. Trust in him. That's why I often say to people who tell me they're learning about Jesus, I say, are you talking to him yet? It's when you start to talk to him that you're beginning to learn to trust him. It's beginning to change from the theory of religion to the experience of Jesus. And so it's not automatic, and it's not for everyone, it's for those who come to trust him. And then Jesus says, no one, verse 6, comes to the Father except by me. Some people say, well, I'm glad that Christianity works for you, but I've got my way. And actually, a lot of English people say that. You know, in England, the most popular thing to sing at a funeral is Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way. And Jesus says, okay, you go your way, but Jesus is the only way to the Father. That's tricky, isn't it? But think about it. Let me ask you another question. What do you expect from God at the end of your life? Some people say they expect to go to heaven. I haven't got any real pictures of heaven, so I just put the sky instead. And so you're quite relaxed about it. It's very popular in Britain when people die. They say, oh, well, he's in a better place now. You say, really? I thought you were an atheist. But a lot of people say, oh yes, he's in a better place now. They did a survey of Durham students a few years ago, and almost all of them thought they were going to heaven. That's very strange. They don't want to be at home with God now, but they thought they'd be at home with him there. Interesting. Some people, when you say, what do you expect? They say, I'm going to hell. And that's quite scary, isn't it? I think only about 17 students in the whole of Durham University in this survey said they thought they were going there. But just think about it. If he knows all about us, and when he comes near, we feel ashamed, it's a possibility, isn't it? And other people say, oh, well, there's nothingness, there's nothing there at all. And you maybe just feel numb. Well, I hope I last a long time, because when I die, there's nothing there, I shall rot, and that's all. But Jesus here gives some wonderful reasons to be hopeful. Do you see what he says? He says, in my Father's house are many rooms. I'm going to prepare a place for you. Now, when Jesus often talks in these little picture language, but this is a difficult picture for me of a place with many rooms. Those of you who live in Hong Kong might think of many rooms a bit like that. But for me, I like a bit of peace and quiet, and there's not much peace and quiet there. There's not much peace and quiet in Cranmer Hall at night either, but that's another story. I think, oh, if it's like that, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's a nice block of flats like these in Glasgow, many rooms. Or maybe it's like this one here, where you've got a family house and they're building on an extension for maybe some other relatives to live there as well. But what Jesus says is, this may be a bit difficult to understand, but he says, I want you actually to be safe right through your lives. Do you know, one of the first Christians said, I desire to depart or die and be with Christ, because that is far better. Huh? Dying? Far better? Yes, he says, if Jesus has prepared a place. And Jesus says, I've prepared a place for you. Now, you can hardly see this, but this is a Dutch artist's picture of his imagination of Jesus as a young boy, because Jesus' father, who adopted him, was a carpenter. And so Jesus learned how to prepare homes. and built them. And Jesus is saying here that God has designed a future for us because he thinks we are so valuable that he doesn't want to lose us forever. He has prepared a place for us beyond death, and he has the plans, but Jesus says, I'm preparing the place. Now, I find this very interesting because Jesus would have learned to use a hammer. But do you know how he made it possible for us to be at home with God? It wasn't that he used the hammer. The hammer was used on him when he was nailed to the cross. And the cross is a very strange thing in Christian thinking, isn't it? Because you see, if you were a respectable citizen in those days but were supposed to die, they chopped your head off very quick. But if they thought you were rubbish and really low, they would nail you on a cross and it would be a long time for you to die. It was the most shameful way they could imagine to treat a person. But this book teaches us that, you know, sometimes you feel that shame if God comes near, or you think about God, you say, I'm too dirty, I'm ashamed to talk to him. Jesus, we're told, carried all that shame because of all the ways we've disappointed God and perhaps disappointed ourselves as well. He paid for us to be at home with God. And so Jesus says, let me try and summarize what he says most beautifully in verse 6 here. He says, if you're looking for meaning or a way through life, he says, I am the way. Now, don't want all that, go back a bit. Take away the hands as well, please. No, you've gone back too far.
Sorry.
No worries. We'll get there in a minute. There we go. Now, next one only. One click. Hooray. When you think about meaning in life, sometimes you are thinking, what on earth am I going to do? I have a friend from Taiwan in Glasgow. He has just applied for a job because he thinks that as a businessman it would be quite good to get some sort of business experience in Scotland, you know, in whiskey business or something like that. Before he goes back to Taiwan, but he has just been turned down by the job. Now he says, which way should I go? What shall I do in life? I really don't know which way I'm supposed to go. And he says, at the moment, I think I'm going the wrong way. And Jesus says there's the one way, and I'm asking, what should I do? Oh my goodness. Now, let me tell you this. Those of you who are Christians here, if they tell you they've got all the answers to life, they're liars. They're not telling you the truth. We haven't got all the answers to life. We've got Jesus who says, I am the way. Now, that is brilliant. You see, if I come to Durham, you remember when you first came to Durham and you got lost? It's terrible, isn't it? They say, I'll meet you in this coffee shop and it's in some silly little alley somewhere that you can't find. And you keep going round in circles and you think, I'm going to miss this appointment. Do you know what I mean? And then you say to somebody, can you tell me the way? And they say, well, you go along here and you turn right and then you turn left and then you go round the corner and then you go on a bit further and under this pass and over the bridge, and you think, I'm still lost. They started the explanation and I couldn't understand it. And isn't it wonderful if somebody says, I'll come with you. Just keep close to me and I'll get you there. Isn't that nice? Yeah. And maybe everybody's come out of lectures and you think, I must keep close. I really do need to keep close. If I lose him, I'm lost. Yes? So you keep close and you get to the right direction. Now, in Jesus' time, they didn't say, I'll come with you. They said, I am the way. So when a Christian says they've got meaning in life, they don't mean they know all the answers. They know the one who made them who has the answers. Isn't that brilliant? And they get to know him, and they find that he has given them that harmony so they can keep close to him and expect him to lead them through. If you think that's odd, ask the Christian you're sitting next to explain to you how it works for them. The second thing I want you to see is that, you see, I am the way, the truth. Second thing, no, do go on, it's absolutely fine. The second thing we need is, he says, I am the truth. He gives us true answers. Just one click. You know, it says, are you telling the truth, no lies? People, I can remember once I said something to a friend while we were sitting on a railway station, and he looked at me and just raised an eyebrow. And I said, yeah, that isn't actually quite true. You see, sometimes you can't rely on people, can you? And sometimes people make a promise, but if they're English, you want to watch the fingers behind their back, because if they've got their fingers crossed, it probably means that they're not telling you the truth. And it's quite difficult sometimes, isn't it? Jesus said, I will tell you the truth, and the truth will set you free. It will really make a difference in your life. You see, Jesus isn't a conman, or he's not like a politician. We're coming up to elections here, and all the politicians will make promises to us which they will not be able to keep. Sometimes because they are conmen, and sometimes because they simply don't have the power and the resources to do it. Jesus says, I am the truth. What he says is what he is. And what he says is what he does. I find that brilliant. But for meaning in life as well, we need what Jesus calls fullness of life. He says, I've come that you may have life in all its fullness. Next one, please. Oh, good, it's come. Sometimes people in England will say to you, oh, get a life. There you go. Somebody fed up with a relationship. Get a life, man! Somebody else in this advert, get a life, go shopping. Have you noticed? You came to Britain and England and you thought it was a Christian country, but actually the religion in Britain is shopping. When people feel down, they say, let's go and buy something. It's absolutely crazy. It's mad. I see Beijing's getting like that as well. But it's looking for, I really want to live. I want to find that deep peace and satisfaction. Now, Jesus said, I am the life. But we believe he gave us life by sacrificing his life. We can start living when you know he carried away what's wrong, what's disappointing, what's bad in us. He carried away our shame. A Filipino woman who tried to destroy her child said to me, it's as though a great burden has come off my back because I can now live. When I was a college student, my left back in the hockey side became a Christian one Sunday night. I thought, I wonder whether it will last. I said to him on the Monday morning, now you're a Christian, what are you going to do? And he gave me a big smile and he said, I'm just going to walk around with my new friend. But you see, if you walk around with your new friend, he's actually the boss, but he loves you, so it's all right. If you walk around with that new friend, when you get to the end of your life, whether it's a long way away or quite soon, you continue going on with him. A woman I knew in the Philippines, she was just about to die. Her family were very worried where she was going, but she knew. And she came to the end and she looked at them and she smiled and she said, aalis na ako. which is what Filipinos say when they really are saying, bye-bye for now, I'm just off. I've got somewhere to go. And that's what it means to have life. It doesn't end. Now, yesterday I finished by saying, are you talking to God yet? I'm saying it again. And I've got here a way that you might talk to God. Oh no, I haven't, but I did have. I mean, it's the last one on the screen. Oh my gideons. Here we go, great. You might just want to say to Jesus, like this one on the T-shirt, I'm lost, please take me home with you. But it's perhaps a bit simple for students, isn't it? So I've done a longer one, which I'm going to read to you. We'll leave it up for those of you who want to talk. Some of you will have to run off quick, but we'll leave it up for other ones in case you would like to use that as a way for you to start to talk to Jesus. It says, Lord Jesus, you made me and have good plans for my life, but I've not lived with you or for you, and I'm ashamed of that. I believe that you came to show me the way through life, to teach me the truth I need, and to die for me so that I could have a new life. I want to know God. So I ask you to forgive me and change me. Come to me that I may be with you now and forever. Just words. But if you really mean it, it could be life-changing. A beginning to trust Jesus, the way, the meaning in life. Okay?